It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Switzerland. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 25 on the players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Switzerland's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. So part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. So we examine the participation of players in games over the recent period and categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, seemingly off the squad, and definitely off the squad. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. And at that time, we'll go back over our list and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three parts. In section one, we're going to look at some general information on the team. Section two is the main part where we cover the candidates in each position and their likelihood of making it. And section three, we'll just summarize and conclude. Let's begin then, but before I do, I have to admit that I have the wrong shirt on once again. This Wales shirt is kind of my proxy for all red and white teams, and it just kind of shows the poverty of my shirt collection. But I was born in Wales, and that is my validation. That's my justification for it. Because that's all I've got. Okay, let's begin then, and we'll begin with some general information in section one. We'll take a look at some of the players who are off the squad. Until now, I've been calling this the retirement section, but these players aren't actually officially retired, but haven't been playing recently. So kind of important players who are no longer on the team. So we begin with Haris Seferov. Haris Seferov is a forward and has 93 caps and 25 goals since 2013. He's actually not that old. He's he's 32 years old, and but he recently moved to Al Wasl in the United Arab Emirates, kind of a retirement league. He was with Benfica before that and has played for some fairly big clubs. So with the team since the 2014 World Cup, and was just a sub in the 2022 World Cup. And as I say, not completely retired. Just hang on a sec. Not completely retired. He did play a couple of games after the World Cup. At least he was subbed in for one and on the bench for one, but he wasn't selected for 10 games, including the last 8 matches. So off the team, although there is a possibility of a comeback. The other one is Breen Mbolo. That's a bit of a surprise because he is only 27 years old. And however, he hasn't appeared since the 2022 World Cup for the national team. So looks to be off the team, but certainly young enough to make a comeback. Breel Mbolo. He played from 2015 and had done 63 caps and 13 goals. He's still playing for Monaco in the French league since 2022. And the Cameroon-born player was with the Switzerland squad since Euro 2016. He was a starter in the 2022 World Cup, so I'm not really sure what happened to him that he's off the team. But anyway, we move on. So no kind of players officially retiring there. Let's look at club affiliations, and we won't go too far into the weeds here. Switzerland only have a few players with top clubs like Inter Milan and Manchester City, but most of their players do play for strong clubs in Italy, Germany, and France. So I'll just give a kind of a sampling of the kind of clubs we're talking about. In Italy, we're talking, there is one for Milan, Bologna, couple with Bologna, and teams of that ilk. Actually, 3 of them with Bologna. In France, Montpellier and Lorient, and Monaco, as we saw. There's another player with Monaco besides Briel and Bolo. I think I didn't mention Milan in Italy. And in Germany, Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Mönchengladbach, some of the top teams. About a quarter of them play in Switzerland, and most of those are with the strongest clubs in Switzerland, Basel and Young Boys. So overall, they are not represented by kind of top clubs, but by quite strong, solid secondary clubs there. Okay, let's move on to the next section. We're going to talk about recent games. So two things to mention here. So the period we're examining is basically since the 2022 World Cup, and they have played 12 games since that time. And so that's what we're looking at for the participation of the players. As far as their tournament history goes, they've been part of every tournament except the 2012 Euro Cup. So going all the way back to 2006 World Cup here. And they've been part of all of them except for that one tournament. So lots of tournament experience here. And there we go. And the last thing we'll talk about here, or the second last thing, I guess, is formation. So again, we won't go too far into the weeds, but they have experimented with various formations. I would say overall, the 4-3-3 formation is kind of the one they've used most commonly in about half of the games, but there's quite a bit of variety here. In 3 of the 12 games, they had a 3-man central defense. Otherwise, it's been a 4-man with 2 central defenders and a right back and a left back. The midfield has quite a bit of variation. The 4-3-3 is the most common, but there are often 2 lines of midfield, like a 4-3-2-1, or even a 3-4-2-1, that kind of thing. So a lot of variation in the midfield, and up front it usually is 1. When there are 3, it's often kind of an attacking midfielder playing as the left forward or right forward, but a couple of times they have had 2 forwards up front, but usually just the 1 center forward there. Okay, and I do want to point out too that the last of these games in March was a friendly in Ireland, and they were quite experimental. So the lineup there is not really representative of Switzerland. They had some regular starters left off, and some players playing out of position, and some new players kind of tried out. So otherwise, it's a fairly steady squad for Switzerland. Upcoming games, well, we're not really focused on the teams here, but let's look at what they got planned just before the World Cup in their warm-up games. On June 4th, they play at home to Estonia, and on June 8th, they play at home to Austria. So those are their warm-up games. And that brings us to the end of part 1, and we jump into, I should actually put that up on the graphics. Why not? Estonia and Austria. Okay, let's move on to part 2, the main part of the media cast here, and we begin with the manager. The manager is Murat Yakin, and he was also their manager during the 2022 World Cup, so staying on with the team there. And he hasn't coached any other teams internationally, but he has managed teams mostly in Switzerland. But he was with Spartak Moscow in Russia from 2014 to 15. And he was a player on the Swiss national team. He is Swiss, and had 49 caps and 4 goals between 1994 and 2004. So that is Murat Yakin leading them through the tournament here. Let's begin then with the players with goalkeepers. So I'll just kind of run through the names and their likelihood of making it, and then give more details on some of the more likely players to that you'll see in the cup. So let's begin with definite goalkeeper candidate Jan Sommer, and also definite Yvonne Mbogo. And then we have several possible candidates. So no one at the likely level, but at the possible level, Gregor Kobel, Jonas Omlin, Anthony Rasiopi, David von Balmoos, and that is it. I thought there were 5, but there are just 4. And then we'll just throw in a couple of names. Jeremy Frick seems to be off the squad. He last appeared on the bench in March 2023. And Philip Cohn, he was actually selected for the 2022 World Cup. He doesn't actually have any caps for the national team, but he hasn't appeared since the World Cup in 2022, so he doesn't seem a consideration for the squad here. Let's go back and look at some of the names then. We begin with Jan Sommer. He's a veteran with the team. He's 35 years old and has been with Switzerland since 2012. 88 caps in that time, and he's one of the players currently playing for a big team, Inter Milan in Italy, and he was actually with Bayern Munich before that. So he's been on the squad since the 2014 World Cup, where he was the backup keeper. But after that, for all tournaments, he was the starter, including in World Cup 2022. So Jan Sommer, a definite candidate here. Oh, and I should tell you why he's a definite candidate. It's because he started 8 of their 12 games since the 22 World Cup. So in the period that we're looking at, he was on the bench for 3 and injured for the last match, but that's not a concern because he did recover quickly from that injury. Next, we have Yvonne Mbogo, and he has been with the team since 2018 with 8 caps, and actually a bit of a latecomer to the squad because he is 30 years old. So got his first cap I don't know what I'm trying to say, so I'll just move on. Mbogo was born in Cameroon, but even he was with a youth club in Switzerland, so he's been playing in Europe the whole time. He's with Lorient in France now, and he was with Leipzig in Germany from 2017 to 2022. So was not actually selected for the World Cup squad, but was the backup keeper for the 2018 World Cup and the 2022 Euro Cup. I say the backup keeper. I don't know where he was actually in the pecking order. He actually was selected for the preliminary squad for the Euro 2016 Cup as well, but didn't make the final cut there. So Yvonne Mbogo has started 3 of their games. So basically when Sommer was out, he was in. And that includes 2 of the last 3 games. So he definitely, at this point, seems to be the main backup keeper. However, who the third keeper is anybody's guess, because we have 4 candidates, all with claims for the spot. So I won't go into too much detail with these players, but Gregor Kobel has been with the team since 2021 and has 5 caps. He was on the roster for the 2020 Euro Cup and the 2022 Gold Cup. He actually started game 3 in the 2022 World Cup when Soma was out with illness. But since then, he started 1 of their 12 games. And he was out 3 separate times with 2 injuries for 5 games, including the last 2 matches. So that may be more of an injury thing. He's not currently listed as injured, so he may come back. But in the meantime, other players have been on the bench, including Jonas Ullman, who was selected for Euro 2020 and Euro 2022. So, however, he was on the bench for the first two games of 2023 and then was off the team for a year and came back for a single game in March 2024. So, but it was their last game. So that does kind of give him a claim, as it were. Anthony Rasiopi has no caps for the national team, and he got his first appearance in September 2023, but he was on the bench for 3 games there, although not the last 2. So his claim may be a bit weaker than the others. Finally, we have David von Bommels, also has no caps at 29 years old, and he doesn't have any international tournament experience, same as Rasiopi. Neither of those have been selected for tournaments. And Van Bommels was off the team for 18 months, but he came back in March 2024 and was on the bench for both of them. So the recency of his participation actually gives him a decent shout. So definitely, I'd say Van Bommels is ahead of Rasiopi there. Okay, let's summarize the position of goalkeeper. And Jan Sommer started 8 of the games, and Mvogo replaced him when he was absent. And so those two are almost, we have them as definite selections. Several candidates, as we saw, have a claim for the third keeper role, and I do have a suspicion that they have brought 4 keepers to some of the games. Van Bommels maybe has the biggest claim because he's been on the bench most recently for the last 2 games, although he was absent before that. And Omlin, we saw, returned from injury for the last game. And then Gregor Kobel is would probably have been the most likely candidate, except for his injuries over the period. So hard to say who's going to be selected amongst those 4. I'd say Anthony Rasiopi, an outsider there. Okay, let's move on to defenders in general and central defense specifically. So as we saw, they usually have 2 centre backs, but in 3 of the 12 games they had a 3-man backline. Let's take a look at the candidates. We have a definite candidate, Emmanuel Akanji, and a also definite Nico Elvedi. Fabian Schär is a likely candidate, and Cedric Zesiger, also a likely candidate, but more of a bench player, which we'll come to soon. We do have Ere Komert, who is coded as a centre back, but we've moved him to the right back position because he's more relevant in that discussion. So we'll skip over him and go to our possible candidate, Besir Omeragic, a possible candidate. And that's it. That is our list of central defenders. Kind of a short list because usually there are 5 or 6 players brought to the team. So we usually see, 6 to 8 candidates or so. Anyway, let's look at the first one, Manuel Akanji. So he's been with Switzerland since 2017 and is 28 years old with 58 caps and 3 goals. And he plays for Manchester City in England since 2022, Borussia Dortmund before that. His first tournament was the World Cup in 2018, and ever since then he has started and finished all the games, so become quite important to them. In this period too, he started 11 of their 12 games and the only one he was not selected for was the last match, which we saw was kind of experimental. So Manuel Akanji, a definite candidate here. Next, Nico Alvedi. He's 27 years old and has been with Switzerland since 2016 with 51 caps and 1 goal. And he plays for Borussia Mönchengladbach in Germany since 2015, so almost for 10 years now. First tournament was the Euro 2016. And in the 2018 World Cup, he was just a bench player. But in 2020 Euro and 2022 World Cup, he was a starter, except in the 2022 World Cup, he started games 1 and 2 and lost his starting position. Illness playing a role in that. Over this period, Elvedi has started 8 of their 12 games and was on the bench for 3 more. So regular starter for the team. Moving on to the likely candidate, Fabian Schär, or Fabian Schär, and he is 32 years old. He's been with the team since 2013 and has amassed 80 caps and 8 goals, which is pretty good for a central defender, a 10% rate of scoring there. And Fabian Schär plays for Newcastle in England since 2018. I won't go through all his tournament history. Maybe the most relevant one is the 2022 World Cup. He was on the bench for game 1, but he took over the starting position from Nico Elvedi, who we saw was injured for game 3, but he continued into game 4 there. So Fabian Schär has started 4 of their 12 games, including the last 2 matches. And he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 4. So just 3 times he was not selected. So we have him as a likely candidate. The other likely candidate is Cedric Zessiger. Cedric Zessiger is 25 years old. He got his first cap in 2021, but only has 3 caps. For the team. He plays for Wolfsburg in Germany. He has no tournament experience here, so he wasn't selected for the World Cup despite being on the team from the year before that. And yes, he got his first cap actually in September 2021, but then was off the team for a year and a half until he came back. And was on the bench for 10 of the 12 matches. So started 1 and subbed in for 1. So consistently selected Cedric Zessiger, but tough for him to get on the field. Nevertheless, we think he will be selected and be on the bench there. Okay, and finally, Besser Omeragic. He's just a possible candidate, so we won't go into too much detail. He's been on the team since 2020 and has 4 caps, playing for Montpellier in France. He also was absent from the team for 2.5 years and came back recently in March 2024. And was subbed in for 1 game and on the bench for 1 other. So kind of making a recent bid for the team here. And given the number of central defenders, I think he has a decent chance of being selected, but would be a bench player if he was. Let's summarize the position of central defense. So they usually have 2 central defenders, but sometimes 3. The 2 are usually Akanji and Alvedi, but Schär sometimes steps in to replace Alvedi, whereas Akanji is almost always there. Just that last game, he wasn't on the field. When they have a 3-man defense, it's not any of the players we presented here. It's actually the left back, Rodriguez, who we'll meet soon, coming in as the left central defender there. The left central defender of a 3-man defense. So that's why we saw that some of these lesser players have trouble getting on the field. because we have an out of position player. And we're going to that position, left back, next. So let's look at the left back position. And here, the player I just mentioned, Ricardo Rodriguez, is a definite candidate. And we have Ulises Garcia as a possible candidate. And then Loris Benito, possible but unlikely. I will talk about him a little bit, but I won't talk about Dominic Schmidt, a player who seems to be off the squad, last appearing in March 2023. So let's go back to the top and look at Ricardo Rodriguez, one of the biggest veterans on the team now. He is 31 years old and has been with the team since 2011. An impressive 114 caps and 9 goals. It's with Torino in Italy since 2020. That was a bit of a step down from AC Milan, who he played for before that. And he's been with the team since the World Cup in 2014, and even in the most recent World Cup, in all of those tournaments, he was a starter, including the most recent World Cup in 2022. And he continues to start, having started 10 of their 12 games over the period since the World Cup, on the bench for one and not selected for one. So Ricardo Rodriguez, not only a definite candidate, but a likely starter as well. Ulises Garcia, I guess, would be his backup, although he doesn't quite play exactly the same position. We'll get to that when I summarize the position. Ulises Garcia has been with the team since 2021, with 7 caps, a bit of a latecomer to the team since he's 28 years old. And he recently moved to Marseille in France since 2024, and was with Young Boys in Switzerland for 6 years before that. So Garcia returned from a 1.5-year absence in June of 2023 and started 2 of their remaining 10 games. And but he wasn't selected for the last 2 matches, so that's why we have him just as a possible candidate, even though he does seem to be the logical backup to Ricardo Rodriguez. And I'll just talk a bit about the possible but unlikely candidate, Loris Benito. He also returned from an absence just in November 2023 and didn't start any games, but was on the bench for 3. But he was injured for the last 2 matches, and that's a cruciate ligament tear since February with an unknown return date. So it may be that he is injured. He actually was selected for the 2020 Euro Cup, Loris Benito, but not for the World Cup because he was kind of off the team by that point. Okay, so let's summarize the position of left back. It is Ricardo Rodriguez usually starting in that position. And Garcia does seem to be the backup. When it's a 3-man central defense, as we saw, Rodriguez comes back. However, he doesn't push up into a winger role when the formation calls for that. So it's Garcia who sometimes comes in to play that winger role, and sometimes actually both of them, I think just once maybe, both of them had started with Rodriguez as a left central defender and Garcia as a left winger. However, the winger role is usually a more attacking player, specifically Dan Ndoye, when the left back converts into a winger. Okay, let's go over to the right back position. And the candidates here, our top candidate, actually, Stephen Whitmere, is just at the possible level. I may move him up to likely, to be honest. But we have several other candidates at the possible level too. Edmilson Fernandez, who's actually coded as an attacking midfielder. I'm trying to pin down his position because one source lists him as a central defender, and most of them have him as an attacking player. Anyway, in this period, we're putting him as a right back because that's the position he's played in over the last 12 games when he's appeared. The next one is Kevin Mbabu. And then we have Ire Comert, who we mentioned as a central defender, but fits better into this discussion. We have a possible but unlikely candidate in Jordan Lotomba. And then a player who seemingly off the team, and maybe I should have mentioned him in the section one. It's Michael Lang, who last played in 2019, but actually appeared on the bench in March 2023. But he does seem to be off the squad. A bit of a, not quite a veteran, 31 caps for Michael Lang. So maybe that's why I didn't put him in that section. Let's go back and look at some of the candidates. I think I am going to move Sylvain Whitmere up to the likely level, because he was off the team for a little while and then came back. But first, I'll introduce him. Whitmere is 31 years old and has been with Switzerland since 2014 with 41 caps and 3 goals. He plays for Mainz in Germany since 2021. But despite being with the team since 2014, his first tournament was actually Euro 2020. And then he was also selected for the World Cup in 2022, where he was a starter. Over the past 12 games, he has started 4. That's the first 2 and the last 2 games of the 12. And he was injured for 4 and not selected for the 4 matches after that. So that's probably why I had him at the possible level. But when we get into the summary of the position, I think it makes an argument for him being a likely candidate. We'll go into a little less detail with the next few players. Edmilson Fernandez, 28 years old, with 30 caps and 2 goals since 2016. And he also plays for Mainz in Germany since 2019. And he started 4 of their 12 games over the period, but he wasn't selected for the last 4 matches at Edmilson Fernandez. Next, Kevin Mbabu, been with the team since 2018 with 22 caps. He's 29 years old, and he is with on the roster for Fulham in England since 2022, but he's actually been loaned out to Augsburg in Germany since 2023. So he was actually a starter in the Euro 2020, but he lost his starting position halfway through game 2 there and wasn't selected for the 2022 World Cup. But he returned after an 18-month absence just recently in March 2024 to appear in both games as a substitute. So kind of making a comeback into the team here, but never fully part of it. Our last possible candidate is Ire Comert, listed as a central defender. His 2 starts were as a right back, and then he had 1 other start as a right central defender, kind of like Rodriguez, but on the right side. So Comert has been with the team since 2019 and has 15 caps, and he plays for Valencia in Spain, or at least is on their roster because he's been on loan to Nantes in France. And now that the season is over, a lot of these loans may have expired. But I'm going on the information that I gathered. Comert started 2 of their 12 games and was on the bench for 5. Selected fairly regularly, but he did miss 4, or was not selected for 4 matches. So we have a lot of candidates there. And let me summarize the position uh, um, which is a bit more interesting than the left side. So Widmer was a starter actually prior to 2023, but in the first two games of 2023. But then he got injured and he was off the team for 4 games, but then not selected for the 4 games after that. He came back, though, to start the last 2 games, which is why I'm putting him as a likely candidate. When he was gone, it was mostly Fernandez who replaced him. But towards the end of replacing him, he got a red card and was suspended then and then not selected for the last 4 games. So in the absence of both of them, Comert came in to replace him once, and so did Lotoma, although Lotoma I don't know if I gave the information on him, has not been selected for the last 5 matches, so we consider him possible but unlikely. So no surprise really that they came back to Widmer as the starter. However, the backup is quite unclear. Babu seems the most likely as the backup, but a couple of these players won't be selected. Actually, I'm kind of thinking Comer may also have a good claim for the backup position. Okay, that is the end of defense. So we move on to midfield. And I've kind of reorganized a little bit. I'm going to talk about defensive midfielders or kind of defensive and central midfielders in one category here. So let's begin with players coded as defensive midfield. We have Denis Zakaria as a definite candidate, but with an asterisk, which I'll come to. And the only other defensive midfielder or player coded that way is Arden Jashari. And he is possible, but unlikely. I'll dispense with him now. He is just a young player, so he didn't start any of their games, but he was on the bench for one, but mostly with the under-21 team or not selected. So even though he was on the squad for the 2022 World Cup, his chances look slimmer of making this squad. We'll actually present the central midfielders too at the same time. I have put those 2 players I just mentioned in the wrong place on the YouTube graphics here. Now we're all good to go. So central midfielders, we have the captain of the team, Granit Xhaka, as a definite candidate, and also Remo Freuler as a definite candidate. We have Michael Abisher as a likely candidate. And then 2 possible candidates in Vincent Sierra and Uram Bislimi. Jibril Sow is coded as a central midfielder, but we're going to move him to the discussion with attacking midfielders, which you'll understand later. And finally, we have 1 player seemingly off the squad. Fabian Fry has not appeared for the squad since the 2020 World Cup, where he was a substitute. So Fabian Fry doesn't look like a consideration for the squad this time. Let's go back and look at these players, beginning with defensive midfielder Denis Zakaria. So he is 27 years old and he has 54 caps and 3 goals since 2016 and plays for Monaco in France. He moved there in 2023, having played for Juventus briefly before that. Denis Zakaria was a substitute in all the tournaments from 2016 onwards, so 4 tournaments there, and a substitute in all of them. However, now he seems to be more of a starter, having started 8 of their 12 games since the World Cup, and subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. So he's always selected. However, he picked up a hamstring injury in early May and is currently listed with an unknown return date. So they may be losing the services of Dennis Zakaria here. So maybe I'll just put him in red to indicate that he's an injury concern. Yes, the other player, Arden Jashiri, I talked about enough, so mostly with the under-21 team there. Let's move on to the central midfielders, Granit Xhaka. So he's been with the team since 2011. He's 31 years old and has 123 caps and 14 goals. He moved from Arsenal, where he was for 7 years, to Bayer Leverkusen in Germany since 2023, going back to Germany, having been with Borussia Mönchengladbach before moving to Arsenal. So his brother actually plays for the Albania national team. And he himself has been part of the tournament play since the 2014 World Cup, always a starter there, and became captain for the 2020 Euro Cup. And there's no doubt that he'll be selected because he has started all 12 of their games. I think he's the only player to do so, all 12 since the World Cup. But also a definite candidate is Remo Freuler. He has been with the team since 2017 and is 32 years old with 65 caps and 8 goals. And he's on the roster for Nottingham Forest in England since 2022. But sorry about that. But he was loaned to Bologna in Italy since 2023. And with Atalanta for quite a while before that, Atalanta in Italy. So he started 10 of their 12 games since the World Cup, and he was subbed in for the 2 others. So also a definite candidate and consistently selected for tournaments since 2018. Our likely candidate is Michael Abischer, and he has been with Switzerland since 2019 with 18 caps, and he's 27 years old, so not as consistently selected as the players we just looked at, but he was selected for the World Cup in 2022, not the Euro Cup though, even though he was on the team at that time. Recently, he started only 2 of their 12 games. At one time, he was a central midfielder and the other an attacking midfielder. And I believe that was in the experimental game, the last game they played in March 2022. So perhaps a bit out of position there. He was also subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 5. Which is why we have him as a likely candidate. Only twice was he not selected. So more of a bench player there in Michael Abischer. Vincent Sierro is new to the team since 2024, just joined there in March. And he did actually start a game and was on the bench for the other. So Vincent Sierro. But we just have him as a possible candidate here because he doesn't have much history with the national team. Next, we have Uran Bislimi. He actually played a couple of games for Kosovo in 2022 before switching his allegiance to Switzerland. So he's been with Switzerland since 2023 with 2 caps, and he got the first one in June of 2023. But he is quite regularly selected. He was subbed in for 2 games and on the bench for 4. So just 3 games since his first one that he wasn't selected for. So we may see him selected for the squad. Okay, but we've given a lot of candidates here. Let's look at the position of kind of defensive and central midfield. So we do know Switzerland's midfield is very prone to change. Sometimes they have 1 line of midfielders and sometimes 2, and then the number of midfielders in those lines ranges quite a lot. Having said that, At the defensive end, at least, it's almost always Zachariah in the middle, Xhaka on the left side, and Freuler on the right. And from time to time, they do kind of switch positions among the three of them. However, there are some changes recently. It has been just two central midfielders a couple of times, and when it is, Zachariah bows out, and it's Xhaka and Freuler. And we saw that Michael Abisher did start one game as a central midfielder, and so did Sierro. Both of those replacing Freuler one time each. Okay, let's move upfield a little bit, and a bit of a unique situation here with Switzerland, because they really don't have any kind of wingers that you would imagine, say, in a 3-5-2 formation. They have kind of players that are halfway between wingers and right midfielders. If you imagine, say, a 3-4-2-1 formation. You have kind of wingers, but they're a bit more defensive. So as we've said, the midfield formation changes a lot. So we're going to combine left winger, left midfielder, right winger, right midfielder here. And we'll talk about the candidates who have been in that position. So actually, Dan Ndoye is a likely candidate as a left midfielder, even though he's coded as a forward. He's our likely candidate. Filip Ugrinic is a possible candidate. And Steven Zuber, and maybe I should have mentioned him at the beginning. He is possible but unlikely. A veteran with the team, though, with 51 caps. But he wasn't selected for the World Cup in 2022. But he did actually return after that in June 2023, and was subbed in for one and on the bench for one, and then kind of dropped off the team again and hasn't appeared for the last 5 matches. So Steven Zuber, not out of the question that he could return to the team, but has been drifting off it for quite a while now. We'll introduce the right midfielders too. Stefan Renato as a definite candidate, more often plays as an attacking, kind of an attacking player, but we will talk about him. Xherdan Shaqiri is coded as a right midfielder, but we're going to move him up upfield a little bit. He's more of a right attacking midfielder, a more offensive player, so we won't talk about him here. And finally, we have Christian Fassnacht, who is off the team. He hasn't appeared since March of 2022. So, March of 2023. So seemingly off the squad, Christian Fassnacht. Let's go back and look at some of the main candidates here. Dan Ndoye, as I said, he was coded as a forward, but we've moved him here since his starts really have been in this position, kind of left winger / left midfielder. So Dan Ndoye, 23 years old and with the team since 2022 with 9 caps. So one of the younger players here, and he's with Bologna in Italy since 2023. So not selected, is actually on the preliminary roster for Euro 2020, but didn't make the final cut, and then not selected for World Cup 2022. So those who are watching, following on YouTube, oh, I forgot to put his name on. No, we're up there. We'll see his name is in light grey, which means he doesn't have any tournament experience. The same is true of Filip Ugrinic, who is also new to the squad. Even though he's 25 years old, he got his first cap in 2023 and has 2 caps. He's with Young Boys in Switzerland. Well, he's a possible candidate. Yeah, so I did have him as an injury concern. He broke his toe in February, but in May he seems to have recovered because he's played for his club team since there. So he got his first appearance. This is Ugrinic in November of 2023, and was subbed in for 2 games and on the bench for 1. But he was injured with that broken toe for the matches in March. So, but it is possible that he can come into the team, maybe a bit more possible than Steven Zuber. We'll look at the right midfield candidates before summarising. Renato Stefan is a definite candidate, although he's not a starter. He's only started 3 games, actually, and he's played in 3 different positions in all 3 of those starts. So we'll see his name kind of popping up here and there. Renato Stefan has been with Switzerland since 2015 with 39 caps and 4 goals, and he's 32 years old and plays for Lugano in Switzerland. He was with Wolfsburg in Germany before that from 2018 to 2022, and had never been selected for a squad despite being on the squad since 2015. His first tournament was the 2022 World Cup, where he was just a substitute. So kind of a perennial substitute is Renato Stefan. As we said, he started 3 of their games, but he was subbed in for 7 games and on the bench for 2 others. So we have him as a definite candidate because he is always selected, even though he doesn't often start. And I think that's the candidates here. So left midfielder / left winger position. So I've said they don't fully use wingers like some other teams do. On the left side, we noted that the left defender Rodriguez doesn't really move upfield to play in this position, at least not in the period that we're talking about, the last 12 games. So it is the left defender Garcia who comes in. He's come in a couple of times to play in this position, but more often it's the forward Dan Ndoye playing that role the most. So Ndoye can also play the position on the right side, but on the right side it's a bit different because the Sylvain Widmer does move up. Unlike Rodriguez, he does move up to a kind of a winger role. So we do see right midfielder Stefan playing there on the left side once, although he's generally played more as an attacking midfielder. So a bit of an odd position is this, and not used that often. Okay, let's go to the forward line. We look at attacking midfielders. So I'm going to kind of combine the attacking midfielder and the forward role. Sometimes for some teams we also put the winger role in here, but it's a bit different for Switzerland. So we're looking kind of at the upper left quadrant of the field, and there we find Ruben Vargas as a definite candidate. And we find Derek Kutesa as a possible candidate. That's all we have over there. So let's talk about them. Ruben Vargas is very important to them. He has started 10 of their 12 games, and he was injured for 1 and not selected for the last match. But that was a bit foreshadowing. But sorry, I just noticed a mistake that I had to fix. Anyway, let's do a little bio on Ruben Vargas. So he's been with the team since 2019. He's 25 years old with 41 caps and 7 goals, and plays for Augsburg in Germany for quite a while, since 2019. So Vargas has been on the in tournaments. He was a sub in Euro 2020 and then a starter in World Cup 2022. So he's become more important to the team as time goes on. However, a bit of a concern with him because he was out with a muscle injury since the last club game. So it was in his last club game that he was out with the injury, and he has an unknown return date. So we don't know how serious this injury is. He has a bit of time to recover, but since he got it so late in the season, it's a bit of a black box. So Ruben Vargas, I think they would be loath to lose him. As we'll see when we get to the summary of the position. So the possible candidate is Derek Kutesa, and he got his first appearance on the bench in March 2024, and he was subbed in for one game and on the bench for the other. So brand new to the squad, even though he's 26 years old. He plays for Servette in Switzerland, actually his third time with Servette. Okay, so really just Vargas over here. Let's summarize the position. It could be a left attacking midfielder in a couple of different formations, or a left forward in a 4-3-3 formation. Anyway, regardless, Vargas is the main man in that upper left quadrant of the field. He's a bit versatile because he did play as a right forward once. And when he hasn't been there, it is the kind of versatile right midfielder Stefan, or we saw in the last game, central midfielder Abisher replacing him there. But that was an experimental game, so I wouldn't take it too seriously as Abisher as the backup. Is what I mean. Okay, let's go to the right side. So the right attacking midfielder / right forward. And here we have moved as Xherdan Shaqiri, initially coded as a right midfielder, but really more of an attacking player. And he is a definite candidate. And so is Zaki Amdouni. We've also moved him. He's coded as a forward, and he does sometimes play as a forward. But we're going to move him to this discussion of right attacking midfielder, since that kind of works the best for our look at Switzerland. So just those two definite candidates here. Xherdan Shaqiri is a veteran with the team, 32 years old, been with Switzerland since 2010 with 121 caps and 30 goals. He's recently moved to what a lot will consider retirement soccer, playing for Chicago Fire in the USA. That's a bit insulting. But considering that he was with Lyon in France and Liverpool in England, it does kind of look like a bit of a step into retirement for him. Shaqiri was born in Kosovo, actually, and is ethnically Kosovo-Albanian. He moved to Switzerland as a child, and he's been part of the team really since the World Cup in 2010. He appeared only briefly there, but has been a part of all tournaments since as a starter. But again, kind of moving a little bit into retirement in the 2022 World Cup, where, well, I guess he just missed game 2 there. So anyway, he has remained important for Switzerland. Started 8 of their 12 games over the last year and a half. Subbed in for one and on the bench for one. He was injured for 2 matches, so kind of remains as important as ever. Xherdan Shaqiri, and we will talk about it more when we summarize the position. The other player here is Zaki Amdouni. So he is fairly new to Switzerland, 23 years old, and has been there since 2022. But he has 6 goals in his 13 caps. So Zaki Amdouni plays for Burnley in England since 2023, moving from Lausanne Sport in Switzerland there. Yeah, he was kind of on the map for the World Cup 2022 because he got his first appearance in June of 2022, but wasn't selected for the World Cup. However, he's become more important to the team, scoring 6 of their 22 goals in qualifying for this tournament, their top scorer. And He started 7 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, and he was subbed in for 5 others. So now definitely entrenched in the team is Zeki Abdouni. So let's talk about the position here, the right attacking or right upper quadrant of the field. And there is a bit more variety of players in this position than on the left side. It is mostly Xherdan Shaqiri, but he does also play in other positions. We've seen him as a central midfielder and even as a centre forward. So Amdouni is there some of the time, so he would seem to back up to the position. And we also saw Stefan playing in this position too, just one time. So yeah, kind of shared with Shaqiri and Amdouni, depending on their formation. Okay, let's move on to actual attacking midfielders. And here we did have Edimilson Fernandez, who is coded as an attacking midfielder, but we talked about him as a right back. Jibril Sow is coded as a central midfielder, but we're moving him here because of where he has played over this period, and we're calling him a possible candidate here. And then we have a player who seems to be off the squad in Fabian Rieder. So he was selected for the World Cup in 2022, but hasn't appeared for the national team since March of 2023. So really, that leaves us just Jibril Sow to talk about. He is 27 years old and has been with the team since 2018 with 41 caps. And he plays for Sevilla in Spain since 2023. He was with Eintracht Frankfurt for 4 years before that. Not selected for the World Cup in 2018, a sub in Euro 2020, and then a starter in World Cup 2022 is Jibril Sow. However, he is out with a broken toe since mid-April, and he's not expected back until June 30th. So the tournament starts on June 14th. So I'm guessing he won't make the squad here. Won't recover in time to make the squad. So a bit of a loss there, but he did only start 1 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup. He started as a central attacking midfielder there. He was also subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 1, but he hadn't been selected for the last 5 matches. So kind of an outside chance at this point of seeing him, especially because of the injury. Okay, let's move on to the forwards. We don't have any players coded as a secondary striker, and we've moved some of the players coded as forwards. So Zeki Abdouni is coded as a forward. We moved him to right attacking midfield. And Dan Ndoye, also coded as a forward. We moved him to that left winger / left midfielder role. So we have a likely candidate in Noah Okafor, and then a possible candidate in Andy Zakiri. And then a bit surprisingly, a possible but unlikely candidate in Cedric Itten. That's because he kind of was starting at the beginning of this period. I'll get back to that. And we have Haris Seferovic, who we talked about as a player off the squad at the top of the podcast, and he does seem to be. But there is a chance of him coming back. He's possible, but unlikely. As we said, he did play after the World Cup. Subbed in for 1 game, but hasn't been around for the last 8 matches. We also have Briel Mbolo, who seems to be off the squad, having not appeared since the 2020 World Cup. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see him return, though. Okay, let's take a look at these candidates then. Noah Okafor is 24 years old, and he's been with Switzerland since 2019. 21 caps and 2 goals. And he's with AC Milan in Italy, having moved from Red Bull Salzburg, who he was with from 2020 to 2023. So he was not a consideration, it seems, for Euro 2020, but was selected for the World Cup in 2022, just coming in as a substitute there. And he started 4 of their 12 games since the World Cup, but he was also subbed in for 5. The only games he was out for were for injury. He had 2 separate injuries, so he wasn't allowed or wasn't able for 3 matches. So Noah Okafor likely to be selected and possibly a starter. Andy Zakiri is a possible candidate. He has 11 caps with the team and they plays for Genk in Belgium. He was off the team for 15 months but came back in June 2023, but he didn't start any games. He was a sub for 4 and on the bench for 2. And wasn't selected for the last 2 matches. So just a possible candidate, Andy Zakiri. Cedric Etten has been with the team since 2019. He has 12 caps and 5 goals. That's a good scoring ratio, but he's not often selected. Wasn't part of the squad for the Euro 2020. That was a bit of a surprise, and also not selected for the World Cup in 2022. So always been a bit on the outskirts, but the reason I was a bit surprised was because he did start 4 of their 12 games, just like Okafor there. 4 of their 12 games since the 2022 World Cup, but then kind of dropped off the team, wasn't selected for the last 5 matches. So now he looks like a possible but unlikely candidate. And because of this lack of forwards, I think Embolo especially, and perhaps even Seferovic, could find their way back into the squad. But let's summarize the position of forwards here. So generally, the starting role moved from Itten to Okafor over the period that we're looking at. However, it's not always just one forward, and other players have occupied the position. So Amdouni did start a couple of times as a centre forward, but that was a bit earlier in the period. And Shaqiri started their most recent game, but as we know, that was a bit of an experimental game. And so probably we wouldn't see Shaqiri as a centre forward. All right, that brings us to the end of the main part of the mediacast here. So we're going to go into section 3 and begin with some closing thoughts. So Switzerland is a fairly stable squad. We saw that most of their players play for reasonably strong teams, only a couple really for top clubs. Most positions are quite stable, even if their formation does change quite a lot. But a couple of positions, especially right back and centre forward, seem a bit undecided. The other thing too is they have a couple of injuries, especially Vargas, the left attacking midfielder, is probably the biggest concern there. Sorry, I just have to cough. Okay, good Lord. Okay, we're going to finish by just racing through the squad and nominating players that we're quite confident are going to start. So that begins with the manager, Murat Yakin. We don't think he will be replaced before the tournament, so we'll consider him a starter. Jan Sommer, the definite starter as the goalkeeper there. The second backup keeper is fairly clear. It's Mbogo. But the third backup keeper, and they may even bring 4. There are 4 candidates that we looked at. So that's a bit unclear. Moving on to defence, Akanji and Elvedi, both definite starters there. Sometimes they go with a 3-man central defence, but when they do, it's not one of the candidates on our list here, but rather the left back, Ricardo Rodriguez. moving into central defence when they have a three-man central defence. But if they don't, he will still be the left back, and Ricardo Rodriguez is a definite candidate there. Right back, as we said, is quite uncertain. Sylvain Widmer looks like the most likely candidate, but we're not confident enough about that to nominate him as a starter. Moving upfield, defensive midfielders is very settled, with Granit Xhaka and Remo Freuler definite starters there. However, a player we might nominate as a starter, Denis Zakaria, is an injury concern for them there. So we're not sure whether he'll make the squad. If they don't, then it'll probably be just a two-man kind of defensive midfield. Over to the left, we kind of categorized a new position, kind of left midfielder / left winger for Switzerland. You'd have to listen for the full explanation for that, but we don't have any candidates who seem like starters when they do use that position. So we move up to attacking midfield. Ruben Vargas will be a starter if he's available, but there's a bit of an injury doubt about him. On the right, Xherdan Shaqiri does seem like a definite starter. Zeki Andouni is working more and more his way into a starting position, and I wouldn't be surprised, but we're not confident enough really to say that he'll be a starter. He could even start as a centre forward here. We don't have any attacking midfielders who look like starters, and even in the forward line, we have Noah Okafor, and we also have well, that's all we have. So we wouldn't be surprised if some of the players who have been off the squad, like Brelin Bolo or even Haris Seferovic, come back. And we've also seen Shaqiri and Andouni replace or play as centre forward. So very unsettled position there. Okafor looks like the most likely candidate, if it's not Amdouni, but we're not nominating any starter there because we're not confident enough. Okay, and we finished just with a preview of what we'll do in part two. In part two, we'll do that when the squads are released, and actually when the final squad is named, that's when we'll do it. And we'll kind of go through the list we compiled today and say any notable non-selections, any surprise inclusions, which might include some new players, and then updates on injuries, which will be important for Switzerland. Okay, but that's it for part one, and thanks for listening. I hope that was informative for you, and we'll see you again in part two. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.